Hello everyone. I'm going to very quickly talk to you about the future. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the project which we did through last year, which was really sensing the future for Triodos Bank, and a project which we did in being able to set our future direction. We were asking ourselves, what do we know about the future? What do you know about the future? Exactly, nothing. None of you know about the future because it's unknowable. It's uncertain. We might think we know things about the future. We might sense things. We might imagine things. We might project things. But we don't know anything about the future. And the process which we used, something called Theory U, takes the starting point that you have to actually stop thinking that you know the future and go out and really sense it. Really go out and speak to people and forget what you think you know and really listen to them, really see what's emerging, really be able to sort of explore with them through their eyes the world as they see it. So we went out, and a senior team went out, and we looked at the future, and we tried to build an imagination of what things could be like. And we did lots of disruptive things, and I should just say as a caveat, just in case any of you are getting worried by this slide, that the appearance of Triodos money is not a rebranding exercise. It was all part of something which starts to disrupt our own thinking about what might we look like in the future. So we went out and we spoke to lots of people. We started with entrepreneurs, and not just entrepreneurs, but new types of entrepreneurs. So we spoke to some of our clients, but we deliberately tried to challenge ourselves and speak to people who are outside our normal sort of talking circles. We went out and we looked at sort of some of the trends within the sharing economy, the circular economy, this whole concept of, rather than owning stuff, where we need rights to be able to use things. So you see things like Snapcar emerging, which is car sharing. People know about Airbnb. It's now over 10 million users worldwide, and Uber, the everyone can become a taxi driver. Seats to Meet is a working hub based in Europe, and it's got over 1 million members. And the person who runs that organization proudly boasts that he has got the biggest IT department in Western Europe and the biggest marketing department in Western Europe. But he doesn't employ anybody in IT, and he doesn't employ anybody in marketing. And again, you sort of start to think, well, how on earth, what is he talking about? Well, because within his membership of the people who are using these facilities, there are the people he can rely upon to do things as and when in this networked organization. Rather than hierarchically needing to own the resource, you can network and bring it in. And it turns things on its head in terms of business model. The picture of the cow there is a Dutch organization called Koop en Cow, where you can buy a cow and crowd butcher it with your friends. In the field of banking, there's also huge amounts of transitions in the finance space. The amazing plethora of crowdfunding organizations, peer-to-peer lenders. This quote from Bill Gates, "Banking is necessary, banks are not," really challenging some of the fundamentals through new technologies, but through also new ways of connecting. People may have read or seen that the big technology partners, so Google, have got Google Wallet, Apple Pay is launched in China, Alibaba have got a mobile app where you look into your phone and you smile to pay. So you smile and it recognizes your face and your smile, and that's what authorizes a transaction. In Japan, there are robot advisors behind working in banks. I've been assured today that everyone here is a real person, but I challenge you to just look closely into their eyes, just in case. There are certain types of innovation which are incremental, and there's certain kinds of innovation which are disruptive. For those of you who remember Back to the Future 2, I think that was actually looking at the year 2025, and there was a sort of a scene of Michael J. Fox looking at a cinema, and it said Jaws 29, the sequel of the sequel of the sequel. But some of the innovation in this space is really disruptive. It's not just building onto what's already known. The technology behind Bitcoin, the blockchain, isn't just potentially replacing currencies, it's replacing some of the fundamentals of the principles of intermediation itself. It's saying, well, maybe you don't need lawyers even to determine things in a legal contract, because there's a way of being able to organize that between peers, between individuals. This is more the sort of in the financial system, but across the whole technology sphere, we have a huge amount of technological development. 3D printing seems new to some people. Some of you may have seen it. 3D printing was actually invented in 1989, and it's really quite passé already. 4D printing is where it's at, which is things which can be printed out and move over time. The way in which it's being used is already hugely advanced in terms of medical applications, printing out customized shaped hips, printing out organs. They're now looking at tissue printing for all sorts of things, including meat. And the way in which things are connected up, the Internet of Things, allows for huge potential efficiencies and mass customization. The fact that you can now design things to purpose and then with your drones deliver it directly to individuals allows for this mass customization. And people can get quite frightened about a lot of things which are potentially going to mean everything's going to be printed out of plastic, and where's the possibility for creativity? But on the other hand, we see quite a few entrepreneurs who are quite excited about the fact that actually this technology, you don't need to own the 3D printer, you can use it. And in fact, you might be able to see a huge upsurge in new artisans with this technology becoming more open to them and being able to customize things. In terms of where this technology lives, well, it already lives all around us. I'll just let this sink in. But mobile data and mobile is becoming more around. You've seen the launch of Apple Watch. Probably nobody has one. Probably all of us will have some or a variant with it before too long. And you see already this individualization. We carry the world with us and we customize it to our needs. And this starts to kind of play into, well, where are the driving forces? We on one hand are seeing a big driving force towards individualization, and at the same time we do sense this need for connectivity and being able to find our own place within the community, and how certain models are trying to bridge those two potentially contradictory driving forces. Our own phones, my own phone at the moment is something called Fairphone, which integrates full chain sustainability, or is really trying to push the boundaries of what can be sustainable in terms of technology to make a phone. And that leads to the main point about mainstreaming of sustainability. We'll hear later on around sort of some of the trends going on in terms of fossil fuels being replaced by renewables, but new types of renewables and new types of technology and environmental technology. You may have seen about the solar plane, but battery technology, it would seem that as there is more renewable energy coming online, that there's greater demand for energy storage, which can balance out flows, and certain other kind of forms of being able to store electricity in things like electric vehicles, which will probably be self-driving. The guy from Tesla says we've already pretty much solved that, and those road tests are already going on in the States and are coming here. You also see carbon neutral diesel, which is being created from reverse electrolysis, so from electricity generated renewably, being able to take carbon dioxide from the air and make diesel. This isn't fiction. Audi are doing it right now. All of this kind of gets into the physical world, but what about the social world? And here, and Rebecca was talking about food banks earlier, but you start to see not just trends in terms of demographics, which will always be evolving, but disruptive demographics. So there's income inequality, which we're aware of. There's also aging society. We're all unfortunately inevitably part of an aging society, myself included. But the disruption in terms of how quickly society as a whole is aging is really rapid. The number of 85-year-olds and older in the next 20 years is due to treble. The ratio, therefore, of those non-working age to working age by 2050, if you kept the working age limit the same, which probably we won't, would double. And that has a huge implication in terms of not just pensions and the economics of the welfare state, but of also the dynamics of society. Healthcare costs are also included within that. In terms of where people live, increasingly, well, since the Second World War, people have increasingly lived in cities, and so there's been a trend towards urbanisation and an imagining of where cities will develop and how they will develop to be sustainable. This is an image of a sort of an integrated urban farm stroke office stroke multi-purpose site. It is quite interesting, and one of the challenges within Bristol being a European green capital is actually exploring some of these questions about what does the city need to really do in order to be resilient and sustainable. It's not just around food growing in cities. I mean, some of the other things which we're already looking at and working with partners in ourselves are in desert area, reclaiming desert areas for food growing, and some of the things which bring into scope what was out of scope before. Not only are populations growing in cities, but populations are growing everywhere. Population growth as we go towards a world of 9 billion and on to 10 billion means that there is a huge demand on other resources. And here's a picture of sort of migrant boats coming from Africa. The European population is shrinking, and in the next 50 years, the Africa-EU population ratio trebles. So rather than only being seen through a very narrow lens of border controls and other issues like that, there's probably a big driving force in terms of how do we all live and work together on a small planet. And from some of these trends of nationalism and fundamentalism, we see a huge potential role for social enterprises and those who can work in a different way to be able to form the right kind of links and right kind of society we want to live in, will probably no doubt emerge. So also within sort of maybe closed and small-mindedness, it comes to the era of regulation and bureaucracy. In terms of bureaucracy, there's no better example than potentially banking. The Basel Committee, so the governing sort of rules for banking are under the Basel Committee. The first Basel regulation draft was 8 pages long. It would probably take you about half an hour to read it, although it wouldn't be a very exciting read. By the time we get through Basel II and the financial crisis coming in, and we get to Basel III and we get all of the other different bits of regulation added in, it will be 60,000 pages long. If you printed it out, it would be a lot taller than me. It would be even taller than some of our supervisory board members here today. And it becomes increasingly emblematic of a world which has gone mad in terms of bureaucracy. And we feel the impact of that ourselves in being able to push out the boundaries with increasing restriction and weight. So we've gone out and we've sensed all of these trends and emerging driving forces, and there's things which we think we have learned. So what's the remaining uncertainty? Well, the remaining uncertainties we felt when we discussed it as a group was, where is the locus of control in terms of the major stakeholders? So are we, on the one hand, going to have big government controlling, or are we going to have small government saying, to be honest, we don't have the money or the will anymore, so we're just going to leave it all to you? And you see both of these things happening. Likewise, the other sort of axis is it going to be a world which is all about this flourishing diversity of civil society actors and entrepreneurs? Or is it going to be about a few mega corporations, the Google, Amazon, Amazoogle, taking over and being able to say, we can provide everything, and you won't need to go anywhere else. We can solve all the problems. So we created, on the basis of that, these 4 scenarios. So big government is to the right, as you look at it, and small government is to the left. And this sort of more dispersed civil society, individual entrepreneur is at the top, and the more big corporate is at the bottom. And we come up with these 4 scenarios. This bottom one, Wolf, was really the scenario of the government taking over it, but in sort of a Putin type of way, the nationalizing of everything, a lot of nationalism, a lot of closed-mindedness, very little room to act, and real pressures in terms of, for us and the kind of entrepreneurs who we support trying to build a new world, that actually things are going to become very, very tight. You move across to the left, where it's still in the big corporate actors who could probably still play a role in that big government space. That this is really sort of not just a corporate America story of the 1980s, but big biz rules, as we called the scenario, is really big corporations on steroids. It's big tech, it's big data, it's being able to know everything about you and being able to customize it. It's the way in which Amazon knows the book that you're going to buy about 3 weeks from now, so that they can already ship it to the distribution center to optimize their distribution channel. And it's being able to apply that in every area of life. There's the Singularity University who talk about being able to say, actually, we're very close to the end of history and being able to have technology which can solve human challenges and be able to resolve everything. Again, we've sort of heard of it before, and it's not to poke fun at the fact that there is real advances being made, and that is a very compelling story for certain types of politician. So what happens when you go up to a more diverse society with entrepreneurs and civil society? Well, we have something here which we called the happy community, and in the end we said it's the happy and unhappy community. Because maybe in places like Bristol, or in San Francisco, or in Amsterdam, you already see this beautiful, thriving hub of entrepreneurs taking control, innovating, working in this new way. And there's the social as well as the financial capital to really make that work. And at the same time, there are big swathes of the country and areas which are really left behind. Even within big cities, you see the massive polarization. And so we see this as being quite interesting in terms of there being some amazing innovation to be able to support from a whole different road. And this is, in a way, there's lots of positivity and energy. And yet when we shared it around the Triodos community internally, we said, we have a moral responsibility here to find ways to build bridges, to work with partners to be able to make things a more equitable society. And that requires a different type, a different form of entrepreneurship and innovation. Finally, we got to a scenario which we called Yes We Can, which is a sort of a big government, but a big government who's really interested in being inclusive, in being able to bring in civil society and entrepreneurial actors. We called it the Obama in Denmark scenario. And it's something where you see already some of the shades of this in social impact bond procurement, some of the things which Dan was talking about just now, and different ways of being able to actually have collaboration and say, look, we need business, we need government, we need civil society to actually work together in different ways, to be able to cut through some of the quite stifling kind of mechanisms of big cross-intergovernmental agreements and say, how do we learn and work together? This isn't just a passive picture for us. We sort of say, well, what is it we want to achieve within our essence of Triodos, and really looking at the people who we support, the people who we want to support in being able to make a better world. Where are the ways in which we can maybe take the opportunities and reduce the difficulties? How can we maybe use technology developments to be able to deepen our personal relationships through digital means rather than replace personal relationships with digital means? How can we participate more in cross-governmental discussions and multi-stakeholder platforms where we don't come into those saying we know everything, but that really we're sharing? And that led to our picture of where we are going to look, but in a way, in reflecting on, this is my last slide, reflecting on what we want to do in carrying ourselves forward into an uncertain future, I was really realizing that there's a lot of things which are relevant for our entire community and for you. There's no way in which we can say, well, if we go into one scenario, we'll act a certain way, and if we go into another scenario, we'll act a different way. We have to act in such a way that we can be resilient for all scenarios. And there were these 4 patterns which we agreed on are the real focus for us in the coming years. Starting at the top, this is a sort of a sense of our innovation has to be much more open, that we have to recognize that our innovation will always be, and in fact, if we're honest, has always been, about being able to connect to people in such a way that the answers are delivered through that dialogue and that we can then meaningfully bring it to life through economic means, through money. That we become much more of a learning organization, that not just doing things, but being able to take how we do things and look at how we can do new things and learn and share that learning, which means being very open and honest about the things which we get wrong in a way for ourselves to improve and for others to improve and for us to develop sectors. That if there is a world which is becoming increasingly tighter and smaller, that we need to find a way of broadening, that we actually can graft onto the core model of the bank other vehicles, other ways of delivering services, other connections with people, or other connections between people and each other that allow us to really achieve our mission. We already do this through investment management and corporate finance and foundation, but there may be other new models in which we can keep on adding, which allow us to be flexible and adaptive. And finally, in terms of being able to find genuine relationship approach, that we really have a meaningful dialogue with people. In a world where technology and algorithms will inevitably try to learn about you to the point where they can simulate empathy, find out all their preferences that you have, and shapeshift to be anything that they want you to be and anything that you want them to be, what does a real relationship mean? And that's really a question for all of us, and in a way, the invitation for today, this is your chance to speak to us as real people, to say, what is it that we're really wanting to do together? How can we relate, and how can we build the future that we'd like to see? Thanks very much. Can I join you here?